Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, Parallel Deku. Back with another fanfiction. This is the movie of What If Deku Was Kidnapped by a Girl? Now before starting, please give this video a like. And subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Was this high enough that if he jumped he'd die? He wasn't going to do it, but it'd be nice to know. Just in case he accidentally fell off, or maybe someone would show up here and push him. Izuku sniffed and wiped the tears from his eyes. It wasn't even anything new. He was used to getting laughed at every single time he said his dream was to be a hero, despite the fact that he had no quirk, which made things all the more annoying. Just last week, his teachers called in his mother for a meeting, not to address the bullying but to get him to stop. In their eyes, it was his fault for constantly provoking the others, especially Kaken, with how he wanted to be a hero. His mom agreed. But he couldn't help it. He wanted to be a hero just like All Might. Normally, he could just SCK it up and deal with it like he always did, but today just wasn't his day. It was getting to him strong. Hey, if we fall from up here, do you think it would hurt? Izuku looked up and saw a very pretty girl effortlessly floating a couple feet in front of him, which meant she was floating several stories up in the air. The black uniform she was wearing was the same as his, and she had both hands placed behind her back while her long blue hair fluttered in the wind. Her bright blue eyes stared at him for a moment before she gasped and covered her mouth with her hand. Hey, she said again and floated closer, her face getting really close to his. Why are you crying? Did you drop something? Why are you on the roof? What's your name? I'm Yojimbra. She tilted her head at him and blinked. Did you know you have freckles? He was crying in front of a girl. A cute one at that. And from the 3 stars on her jacket, his upperclassman. Wait, what was he supposed to say? He wasn't any good at talking to girls. You're pretty. Wait, was that weird? Oh, I know. She hummed and poked her cheeks. My grandpa calls me the cutest thing in the entire universe. Which isn't the same as pretty, but close enough. So thanks. Wait, that doesn't answer any of my questions. He stared at her for a few seconds, his mind still trying to process exactly what was happening. Who was this girl? Wait, she said her name was Yojimbra. She was his senpai, so he should probably answer her. Which one do I answer first? Name. I'm Izuku Midoriya. He gestured towards the 2 stars on his jacket, and I guess you're my senpai. Cool. Nice to meet you, Izuku. She twirled in the air, causing a bit of her long light blue hair to brush him. She zoomed into his face again and smiled. After a moment of scrutiny, her brows furrowed and she pouted at him. So why are you crying? I'm surprised you don't know. He laughed and wiped the tears from his eyes. He could hear his voice cracking. I mean, I'm pretty sure the whole school makes fun of me because of it. Oh, I'm new here, so if you're famous I didn't know. She bowed slightly. But why do people make fun of you? She placed her hands on her hips and nodded to herself. And they sound like jerks. You seem like a nice guy, Izuku. At least I get good vibes from you. Thanks. He smiled and kept wiping his eyes. His tears wouldn't stop. Maybe crying was his DMN quirk. So, she scooted towards him. Why do they make fun of you? Well, it's because I want to be a hero. Her face scrunched up and she looked down at the ground. What? Why would they make fun of you for that? Basically, everybody wants to be a hero. Well, everyone I've met here, other places not so much, but they're still super strong and stuff. And like, everyone in my class keeps telling me I should be a hero. Izuku shrugged. Well, it's also because I'm quirkless. Oh, she made an excited noise. I'm quirkless too. But, Izuku looked at her feet for a moment and the fact that she hadn't touched the ground at all since she first met him. If it wasn't for her hair hitting him in the face, he would have thought that she was some hallucination or some illusion someone made to mess with him. You're flying. Yojimbra snorted and waved her hand. The smugness on her face was actually pretty cute. You don't need a quirk to fly. You just need training. I know. She grabbed his hand. Come on. I can take you to my dad. He's great at it. He even taught my mom. Wait, maybe I should get my Uncle Gohan to help. I think he's busy teaching at UA though. Yojimbra shrugged, and then effortlessly picked him up by just his hand. Wait, what? Hold on tight. But don't worry. I'm really good at catching people if I drop them. What? No. Did you just say your own sound effect? Yes. It helps me concentrate. Izuku could do nothing but contemplate how nice Nijire's hands felt as he was dragged across the entire city by a strange girl that claimed she was quirkless but could somehow fly. Also, he couldn't help but think about how he left his shoes in his locker and was going to have to walk home in his school slippers. Which wasn't anything new, but he liked his giant red shoes. Before he knew it, he had a face splattered with bugs, but he found out where Nijire was flying towards. It was a large, yellow, dome-shaped building, surrounded by a walled stretch of greenery that seemed so out of place in the middle of Tokyo. But this place was famous as UA or Might Tower, maybe even more so. It was the home and headquarters of Capsule Corp, the family-owned company that somehow had a monopoly on capsule tech. They were the foundation of most modern technology, though Island had a lead in support gear. He knew that much because he heard people on the Teen Beach complain about them. But he also knew that any villain that tried to attack the place was dealt with by their security. Nijire? Izuku pulled up his legs as they flew over the wall. Was he allowed to even step foot in here? 1 second, she shouted and laughed as she flew around the building, letting every single camera and person there see them before she landed in a large flowery garden. Phew. I'm not used to flying with passengers. That was a lot of fun. Hey, are you okay? You look like you might want to puke. Did I go too fast? No, we just shouldn't be here. He took a step back and looked around the garden. It was very nice, and it looked very expensive. You are standing on my tulips? A robotic voice sounded from behind him. Izuku felt like he could fly half a second as he turned to see the gigantic red-haired man that looked like he could outflex All Might. The fact that he was wearing a gardening apron and holding a shovel that was several times too small for his hands did not make him look even slightly less terrifying. Oh hey 16. Nijire jumped and waved her hand at the large man. Have you seen my dad? Trunks is, the man replied with a dull drone. 16. Was he related to 13? Why did he sound like a robot? Was he a robot? Was being a robot his quirk? So many questions. Nijire, another voice shouted, and Izuku felt like he might have a heart attack. Was it normal to have a heart attack at 12? He looked towards the source and saw someone he vaguely recognized, the future head of Capsule Corp, Trunks Briefs. Right behind you, 16 finished. Was Trunks her dad? Wait, Izuku looked towards Nijire. I thought you said your name was Hado. That's my fake last name so I can go to middle school and meet friends. But I found you so I have friends now. She clapped her hands and smiled at him. Why did it feel like what little control he had in his life had been taken by this strange girl that said quirkless people could fly? Well, at least she was nice. Oh hey daddy. Nijire jumped and waved her hand in the air as Izuku realized that Trunks was also flying in the same way that Nijire had. I came home early. When this is Nijire, Trunks landed in front of them both, a frown on his face. Trunks was tall, muscular, and had soft purple hair that, despite the grease on his face, looked incredibly soft and clean. Which might be where Nijire got it from. He was dressed in a simple tank top with large baggy pants and even a tool belt hanging from his side. How many times do I have to tell you not to fly home? A lot more. Nijire shouted and gave her father a victory sign. Besides, every time I ask you never tell me why. Because I don't trust your sense of direction? That's not a real reason. Was this how rich people acted with their parents? Ahem. 16 loomed over Izuku. Oh, was this how he was going to die? Tulips. Oh, Izuku stepped off the flowers and bowed towards 16. Sorry, sir. 16 stared for a moment. You're polite, I like that. Well, that was good. And who are you? Trunks asked. Izuku just stammered. Nijire, who is he? Oh, this is Izuku. He's my friend. I found him on the roof. Nijire jumped and floated up into the air, smiling brightly. He's quirkless too. So I brought him here to help him learn how to fly. Trunks looked at Izuku more closely, and Izuku felt like he was staring at someone that could crush him in several different ways. Capsule Corp was rich enough that they could make a nobody like him disappear with ease. With a sigh, Trunks turned back to his daughter, a scowl on his face. Nijire, we can't just teach anyone how to fly. He's not like us. Not like them. What did that mean? So, neither is Aunt Videl, or Mom, or Uncle Krill, or Nijire. Trunks groaned and pinched his nose. I swear your grandparents have spoiled you. Nua. Nijire laughed and grabbed Izuku's hand. She smiled at him so easily, and then spun back towards her father. I know. Grandpa always says I should train more. So I can have him train Izuku with me. You grandpa will kill him? What? Because Dad isn't good at holding back. Trunks sighed and ran his hands through his hair. And besides, he's gone on a trip. Without me. He's no longer my favorite grandpa. Nijire pouted and tapped on her chin. What about Aunt Videl? She said that Uncle Gohan taught her. Wait, what about Uncle Gohan? They're both too busy. Trunks hopped off the ground and looked back towards the main building. Oh. Nijire jumped up and clapped her hands again. She flew around Trunks and then behind Izuku. I know. I'll teach him how to fly. It should be easy. Trunks rolled his eyes and smiled. Look, Izuku was it? Sir. Yes, sir. Sir. Izuku gave a mock salute and could feel his entire body shaking. Just Trunks is fine. Trunks waved his hand like it was no big deal. When you're ready to go home, just talk to 16 here and he'll get you there safely, and sorry for my spaz of a daughter. She's a handful even for her grandpa. Nijire just beamed with pride. Thank you for having me. Izuku gave a polite bow and watched as Trunks flew back into the main building. Now come on. Nijire tugged his arm and gave him a great big smile. We probably have some workout clothes that will fit you, then we can get started with your flying training. And then we can work on energy blasts too. Energy blasts. Wow, I can't believe my dad's old training clothes fit you. Nijire seemed to bounce with every step she took, sending her thick blue ponytail flying about like it had a mind of its own. The dark blue clothes she had on were a near match for the outfit he had been given to put on, and it left her arms and shoulders exposed while completely covering her legs. It looked almost like a martial artist's uniform. Though, Izuku wouldn't exactly call this a good fit. He nearly had to tie the belt around twice, and it felt like he was swimming in both the shirt and the pants, which was odd considering how heavy they felt. According to his mom, that meant that they were expensive. And speaking of expensive, Izuku had been constantly worried about accidentally breaking something that would take a lifetime to pay off. He was especially wary of all the random pots that seemed to line the hallways. Thankfully, the room that Nijire had led him into lacked those features. Instead, it was a large circular room that, aside from a few weights and other training equipment, had nothing of note in it. Well, besides a pillar in the center of the room that housed a computer that looked so expensive that Izuku was pretty sure his mother would faint at seeing how many zeros were in its price tag. He stammered, following after Nijire and swallowing slightly. Are you sure I can learn how to fly? Yeah. I mean, I'm quirkless too and I can do it, but I think it's easier to learn when you're little. Nijire tapped on her cheek and then crossed her arms. Or maybe it was because I'm part alien. He knew it, this girl was crazy. But then again, Aunt Videl, Uncle Krillian, Aunt 18, and Piccolo can all fly, and they're not scions. Nijire looked excited and then pouted. Wait, Aunt 18 is an android. What now? And Piccolo is an alien too, but a different one. She shrugged. Still, that's two humans I know that can fly. And my mom can fly. Dad taught her when they were dating or something. I asked Grandma if she could fly, and she just showed me her airship, but that's less fun than flying on your own and stuff. Oh, so there were two aliens. Where was that Trunks guy? Izuku needed an adult. Wait, a different adult that actually seemed responsible. 16. Wait, was 16 related to 18? Was he an android? Was that why he talked like a robot? Wait, where was 17? Was the hero 13 related to them? So many questions. Izuku scratched the back of his head and looked around the training room again. But what makes you think I can fly? Because you're quirkless. Nijire clapped and floated up into the air. My other grandpa, well, he's not really my grandpa, he's actually my my grandma calls him my grandpa's boyfriend, and my grandpa calls him an idiot a lot. Nijire blinked at him as she slowly turned sideways. His name is Goku. Anyways, my grandpa Goku said that people with quirks can't learn how to fly or shoot energy blasts because they don't have ki. She paused, now completely upside down, her loose shirt falling down to reveal her stomach and the sports beer she had on. Despite only being a year above him, Nijire had a bit of definition on her stomach, and he was pretty sure that awoke something in him. Wait, was it my grandpa Goku that said that? I think it might have been my Uncle Gohan actually. Okay, what's ki? It's our energy. She flipped in the air and landed softly on her feet. Here, watch. Nijire adjusted herself into a stance, then her hair began to float on its own as her muscles tensed. Izuku could feel the air around them change like it was being filled with an energy that had all the hairs on his arms standing on edge. For a moment, it felt like he could see a colorless aura engulf Nijire before she stopped and smiled at him. Hey, you felt that, right? She pointed a finger at him. I think so. And clapped before she darted over to him, flying around and laughing. I knew it. I knew it. Ha. She landed on her feet, giggling into a walk beside him. That was ki. I think if you can feel it, that's a good sign. At least that's how my grandpa and dad taught me how to use my ki. Hope had his heart beating faster than the fact that a cute girl was still talking to him, and he couldn't help but feel more than a little excited at the idea of learning how to use ki. If he could, then he wouldn't need a quirk to be a hero, and it sounded like it was something he could do because he was quirkless, which was honestly a first in so many ways. Normally, he was excluded from things because he was quirkless, like quirk class in PE, okay? Izuku felt like he was getting pumped up now. What do I have to do? It's not going to be fun. Nijire hummed and kicked at the ground. It's honestly really strong and I could barely do it. I mean, it was so strong I thought I was going to die. Izuku bit his lip. It beat feeling like he had earlier today. It beat feeling hopeless. It beat feeling like he wouldn't be able to do anything. I'll do it. Alright, but it's really super strong. Nijire placed a hand on his shoulder and took a deep breath. You have to meditate? He should have known. He'd only known Nijire for a couple of hours at this point, but he could tell that sitting still wasn't exactly something she was good at. Okay, but then what? I don't know, my dad said he was going bald because of me, and then my grandpa yelled at him that scion hair never changes or something, and then told me I was a princess and that I could do it, and then I was flying. Nijire shrugged. Nijire? Yes. Have your parents ever put you on a leash? Yeah. It was super frustrating because I wanted to go explore stuff. She flapped her arms for no reason and beamed a smile at him that completely nullified any downside of her being a bit of an airhead. Why? Izuku shrugged. Anyways, how do I meditate? Well, Nijire tapped on her chin and then frowned. I don't really know. She gave a great big smile. I think we start by sitting down and then doing something like this. Nijire grabbed an invisible ball in the air, her fingers extended around it while she hummed softly. He felt that tingle again a moment later, and this time he could see Nijire's ki clearly. It was a small mote of light in between her palms that seemed to make the light around her dim with its brightness. See, just do this. I don't think I can do that. Izuku stared at his own palms and then frowned. I mean, I don't think I have any ki. How do you know? She scooted closer, her face getting way too close to his. Have you ever even tried? I'm a quirkless kid that wants to be a hero. I have tried everything from shooting lasers out of my eyes to running super fast. He scratched the back of his head and sighed. I've tried a bunch, but nothing ever happened. I was just some quirkless kid. Okay, but have you ever really tried? Nijire flapped her arms and then tilted her head at him. Because it kind of sounds like you didn't and you just gave up whenever it wasn't easy. But fair. Okay, I'll actually try. Okay, you're going to be my first and best apprentice. After 30 minutes of sitting and holding his hands in the exact same spot, the only thing Izuku felt was a soreness that spread from his legs and soon covered his whole body. His arms were especially tired after being held in the exact same spot. To add to this was the strain on his eyes. It wasn't that he wasn't blinking, but Nijire was sitting so close, staring at him with a level of calmness that he couldn't help but respect. It almost seemed alien for her to sit still for so long. And trying not to look Nijire in the eyes when she was staring right at him felt harder than trying to gather this key energy he was supposed to have inside of him. Am I doing it right? He asked, staring at the center of his hands even harder. I have no idea. At least she was honest. She grabbed his arm and pinched at it a couple of times. My grandpa said that ki is tied to our bodies, so maybe it's because you're not strong enough. I know. We should train your body. That'll probably help you a lot. Especially if you want to be a hero, right? If Izuku had to sum up this afternoon, it would be kidnapped by an adorable airhead and told if he worked out he could learn how to fly. Still, it wasn't like he had any other options, and Trunks didn't seem to think that it would be impossible to learn. But maybe he needed a second opinion. What did you have in mind? He fell on his back and let out a breath he hadn't been aware he had been holding. Because I feel exhausted just from doing that. That must mean it was almost working. Nijire jumped up and smiled down at him. I know. We can go ask my mom for some snacks and then we can come back here and I can teach you how to fight. She jumped and laughed. Wait, if I get my dad or grandpa in here we can even turn up the gravity. That's supposed to help with training lots. She stared at him with a blank face. I'm not supposed to use it without permission because I almost died. Again, not surprising. Sure. He stood up and rubbed his arm. It was sore where Nijire had poked him. That sounds like a good idea. Awesome. But you won't be mad if a girl beats you, right? I had a guy friend that was mad I was better at him in soccer and now he hates me. Nijire, you're amazing, I won't be offended if you beat me. Hee hee, I'm glad I bumped into you Izuku, you're a good friend. Now come on. She grabbed his wrist. Let's go find my mom. Nijire's mother was a tall woman with long, straight black hair and bangs that almost met her eyes. She had on plain, baggy clothes and was wearing a pink apron while also wearing large black combat boots. There was also a slight edge to her eyes that made her seem ever so slightly dangerous. Nijire bounced over to the countertop and jumped into the air. Can we have some snacks? I'm teaching Izuku how to fly and he's tired and we need to train his body so he can have enough ki for it. Also, this is Izuku, I found him on the school roof today and he's my friend. Nijire, her mother asked in a soft tone. Yeah. What did we say about breathing? Remember to do it when I'm talking. Right? It lets other people catch up with what you're saying. Nijire's mother patted her daughter's head and then shot a glance at Izuku. Why did it feel like he was being inspected? I'll get you two some snacks in a moment, but first, can you take care of the laundry for me? Sure. Nijire left the room with a vocalized nyum. Nijire's mother walked from around the table and leaned down slightly to look Izuku in the eye. So, you're Nijire's friend? Kind of. Izuku squeaked. I just met her today, and then she grabbed my hand and flew me here. Nijire's mother clicked her teeth and scowled in the direction Nijire had vanished. For a brief moment, Izuku feared for Nijire's life. That girl? With a sigh, she turned back towards Izuku and smiled sweetly. Thanks for putting up with my spazoid of a daughter. On my briefs, but please call me Mai. Izuku Midoriya. He bowed slightly, his first proper greeting since entering this place. Now then, do your parents know you're here? Mai asked sweetly. No, he shouted and then reached for his pockets. Wait, he was still wearing the old training clothes. I should let my mom know. Give me her number and I'll give her a call, Mai said softly and pulled out her cell phone, offering it to Izuku. Mrs. Mai. Izuku asked as he started to dial his mother's number. Is it true what Nijire said? In case you haven't noticed, my daughter says a lot of things. Right, I meant about me learning how to fly even though I'm quirkless. And not an alien. Oh that. Mai smiled as she took back her phone. She patted him on the head and smiled. I know it's strong to believe, but it's pretty much all true. She hopped into the air and did a spin before landing. I'm not as good as my daughter, but Trunks did eventually teach me how to fly. Although, I think he only did that to spend time with me when we were little. And it's not a quirk? Nope. Mai gave a small laugh. I'm sure it's strong to believe, but I'm quirkless. It does take a lot of strong work though, and you have to be in pretty good shape too. All right. Izuku pumped his arm and jumped a bit. I'll give it my all. That's the spirit. Now what's your mother's name? Mai asked as her phone began to ring. After a short conversation on the phone, his mother was more than happy to let him stay there for a bit longer, so long as he was home by 8. There were very few parts on his body that weren't sore in some way or another, mostly due to Nijire and her only having a vague concept of her own strength, but also because of the fact that he simply hadn't trained his body at all. Essentially, he was starting from zero, maybe even less than zero, but despite all of that he had moved forward. Even if he could keep up with Nijire, he wouldn't lose sight of her. Unless she decided to just fly away without telling him. The shadow of the Capsule Corp building was slowly encroaching upon them as the sun set. Nijire had led him near the garden where 16 was already waiting for them. "You're going to be super tough one day, Izuku." Nijire pumped her arms and bounced as they stood in the middle of the garden. She was still in her training clothes from earlier, and it looked nearly unchanged from all the training they had done today. Though, the few sweat drops he had spotted on her forehead during the training had to mean something, right? "I don't know of anyone at school that could keep up with me like that." Keeping up. He felt his non-existent muscles scream at the thought of it, but the pounding of his heart filled him with pride at the idea. Yeah, he let out a breath. He was really close to just passing out where he stood. He'd have to figure out what to do about his stuff he left at school, but it wasn't like he was the first kid to leave his bag behind. It could be sitting there waiting for him on his desk or in the teacher's office. I guess I'll see you at school tomorrow." "Yeah. We can eat lunch on the roof. I've always wanted to do that." "And do you want to come and train tomorrow? You have to do it a lot to get strong." "And Negative, Nijire." 16, who was apparently in charge of safely delivering Izuku home, spoke in a firm voice. "Your mother informed me that you need to study tomorrow." Nijire stuck out her tongue at 16 and then pouted. Izuku gave his shoulder a light rub and groaned. "I think a day off from you beating me up is a good idea." He paused and tilted his head to the side. He could feel the regret of what he was about to suggest pouring swelling up inside of him. "But I can still come tomorrow to study." 16, how does that sound?" The apparent android hummed. "I will inquire with your parents." "That's a no then." Nijire let her shoulders slump, then like nothing even happened, she bounced right back up. "Well, just make sure we train a lot. I want to have a friend I can fly around with and go on super awesome adventures. Like the ones Grandpa Goku went on." He had no idea what that meant, but he liked the idea of flying. Oh, he felt the muscles on his face twitch with exertion. "Can you show me what an energy blast is?" "Sure." Nijire held out her hand, and that same tingle Izuku felt earlier radiated from her. Her long blue hair rose up an inch as though the wind had picked a fight with it. And then a ball of light appeared in her hand. "Wait," 16 said. And then the orb fired from Nijire's hand faster than Izuku could follow, and an explosion in the nearby ground sent dirt and flowers flying up into the air. That was like Kakin plus Ultra. "My tulips!" 16 shouted, his stoic voice devoid of actual emotion. Nijire jumped into the air. "I'm sorry, 16. Izuku asked me and I just wanted to show off. I wasn't thinking and I'll help." "I can." "No," 16 said in his usual cold voice. "You have done enough." "I'm sorry." Nijire whined. He felt bad for Nijire, but he honestly couldn't help but smile at what she just did. Energy blasts were so cool. By the time Izuku got home, fatigue slammed into his body full force and all he could think about was food and going to bed. "Izuku?" his mother asked the moment he walked in. She appeared from the kitchen with a great big smile on her face. Then it turned into a frown. "Izuku, what happened? Were you mugged on your way back?" "No," Izuku muttered and smelled the flavor-rich scent of his mom's cooking. "Nijire's just a bit rough is all." "Nijire," his mother nodded. "She's your new friend, right? I know I mentioned training, but you look." She stared at him for a moment and then smiled again. "Happier than I've seen you in a while." "Yeah." He scratched the back of his head and winced at the soreness. He wanted to tell her about the flying, about the energy blasts, about everything, but he held his tongue for a moment. His mother didn't believe in him being a hero, so what did it matter? "Well, as long as you're happy, I suppose." She cut the awkwardness with a short laugh. "Now come on, I just finished cooking, and I want to hear all about Nijire." He barely had the strength to eat, let alone blush, but still Izuku just smiled softly and answered his mom's questions. Which was easy, because oddly enough talking about Nijire was easy. She was just happy. That night, Izuku dreamed of flying. At first, Izuku had thought that Nijire had brought him a bento, which was something he quite frankly wasn't ready for on any emotional level. But that thought was promptly devoured when he saw how Nijire ate, which was somewhere between a shark and a vacuum cleaner. So, Nijire muttered, her cheeks puffed to the maximum with rice while she chewed and talked at the same time. Do you have any other friends, Izuku? Not really. Most people make fun of me because I'm quirkless and I want to be a hero. He poked at his own food and felt hunger rush through him as he remembered what exactly he did yesterday. His body was still sore, and it needed vast quantities of food to replenish itself. But I guess I have a few. Nijire nodded while chewing and then took a drink of her tea. What about you? Izuku asked. Well, I was homeschooled for a while, but before that I used to go to a different school, but then a bunch of new students moved in and were put in my class, and they all tried to be my friend and some of them were, but then it turns out a lot of them were adopted, which sounds really bad. She swallowed her food. But they were adopted by a bunch of rich people that wanted to influence me or something, and a lot of them hated me. Nijire tapped her chopsticks on her chin and then pointed them at him. That's why I go by Hato now. So don't go telling people. Don't worry, Izuku smiled, I really don't care about all that stuff. I know, Nijire smiled at him. That's why I like you. She hummed, well that and you let me beat you up and you don't really cry about it. I mean you do kind of cry, but you put up with training with me. And my dad only sometimes does that. Oh, and don't worry about 16's tulips. We fixed them and started planting some more of them. She blinked and looked at him. My dad was going to ground me for doing it, but my mom talked him out of it, because she says you're a good influence or something. What do you think that means? Ugh, that your mom likes me. She does. Nijire snapped her chopsticks again. And during dinner, my grandma asked about you a lot, after she got done laughing about 16's tulips. What did you say? Just that you're super neat. And you're probably really smart too. And you're going to be super tough one day too. She also said that I should invite you over for dinner. She paused and furrowed her brow at him. She also said a sleepover would be fine, but Mom and Dad both said no because I'm a girl and you're a boy, but then Grandma rolled her eyes and winked at me. Nijire tilted her head to the side. I don't know why she winked at me. Izuku just shrugged and kept eating. I don't know, I never met your grandma. What's she like? She complains about being old a lot. Nijire nodded like it made perfect sense. She also likes good food and is pretty bossy, but she's super smart. I think she even built a time machine once. Given the whole thing about being able to fly yesterday, he was willing to believe that. She likes to complain about Grandpa a lot too, but I think that's just because they love each other and stuff. Nijire smiled and put a bit of food in her mouth. And what about your grandpa? You talk about him a lot. Izuku examined his mostly eaten bento and frowned. He was still hungry. Maybe training so much is what made Nijire eat so much. Or was it because she was part alien? And what does he look like? Does he look like an alien? No, he looks like a normal person, just more angry. Mr. Piccolo though looks a lot more like an alien. He has green skin and you can see his muscles. They're pink. I think he's called a Namekian. But my grandpa went on a trip. I think he's training someone somewhere or something. My grandma always complains that he's never around when he's gone, but then she complains that he's always around when he is here. Nijire kicked her legs and looked up at the sky. But I think he's super strong. I think he might even be the strongest person in the world. Well, maybe Grandpa Goku is stronger, or my dad, but they're super duper tough. Really? Izuku asked. Do you really think they're stronger than All Might? Nijire turned to him and blinked. Yeah, Uncle Goku even beat All Might in the world's martial arts tournament. What? Izuku stood, dumping his empty bento onto the floor of the school roof. I didn't know All Might fought in the world's martial arts tournament. Yeah. At least, that's what my dad says. I know. You can come over and we can watch the match. Don't you have to study? Nijire puffed out her cheeks into the mother of all pouts. Jeech, it's not like my grades are bad or anything, but I still have to study so much. And it's so boring. Yeah, Izuku nodded. But apparently it's better when you do it with friends. He scratched his head and sighed. But since you're a year older, it might not help? Blah. Well, we won't know if we don't try. We need to talk to my parents and convince them that you can help me study. She finished her bento and hopped up into the air. Come on, let's go. The bell rang and Nijire placed her feet back on the ground. Let's go to class. Izuku offered, smiling up at his new and very vocal friend. Nijire pouted again. Fine. Izuku placed his pen down. The table he was sharing with Nijire had a large array of books and snacks scattered about it. Despite Nijire's normal chaotic behavior, she was a diligent studier, or maybe it was just because she wanted to prove to her parents that they could study together and have it work. But, despite that hanging over his head, Izuku found himself drawn to the TV as it was playing old footage from nearly 30 years ago. On it was a man that looked like All Might in his younger years. He was dressed in a casual set of t-shirt and jeans, and he went simply as Mighty Fighter. Facing off against him was a tall man wearing an orange GI, not dissimilar from the training suit that Nijire had let him use yesterday. He was tall, muscular, and had messy black hair. And his name was Goku. There was something about 1.5 times gravity that made it sound like such an insignificant amount. Conceptually, he understood the amount, but his mind just didn't make the connection. Like, if he was told that it was a 50% increase, he'd be able to grasp the concept more, or if he had been told that gravity was being increased by half. But 1.5 times just didn't quite process in his mind. But his body felt it. Izuku groaned as Nijire looked down towards him, her usual energetic smile soothing him for just a bit, but also reminding him that training was far from over. Her hand was still wrapped around his wrist from where she had effortlessly flipped him onto his back. After a month of training, Nijire's father Trunks had agreed to change the gravity, but only after Izuku could do 10 pull-ups. Considering how during fitness exams his previous record was 0, he was already a lot stronger than before. But right now, his hair felt heavy. You almost had me that time, Izuku. Nijire chirped and pulled him up off the ground with ease. He wasn't quite sure why the ground in this area didn't hurt when he was slammed into with the current gravity, but then again, he didn't understand how they were increasing the gravity either. Do you want to take a break, or are you good to go? Dad said that I needed to make sure you were okay, and Mom said that she'd make snacks and stuff. He could barely stand. Less than half the time he normally spent training with Nijire, and it felt like he was 4 times as tired. It was like his first day again. But double. Still, Izuku nodded and assumed the same fighting stance that Nijire had shown him, and nodded again. Apparently ki came not only from his body, but from practicing martial arts as well. And training with the gravity going up was going to help him do both. At least in theory. But still, even after all this training, Izuku couldn't feel his own ki. He could sense Nijire's ki pretty easily at this point. Even when they were at school and several rooms away from each other, he could just feel her. This also extended towards Trunks as well, though he couldn't quite feel Mai, and Bulma just laughed when he asked her about her ki. Ready? Nijire hummed, entering her own combat stance. Despite the gravity, her hair was still just as bouncy as ever, and Izuku could honestly believe that she could deal with 5 times gravity. His mind struggled with that concept for an entirely different reason. When you are, he replied, feeling his entire arm shake just from holding it still. Ready, Nijire sang, set, go. As per usual, Izuku started by taking a heavy step forward that kept his entire body grounded while he attempted to strike Nijire. At first, he had a problem with that idea. Then he saw how she trained with her father. Not that he could ever actually hurt her. He struck, arm extended into a straight line with his palm out first. The momentum of his upper body was behind it, while his center of gravity was stationary. In terms of speed, power, and technique, Nijire had him beat. But he could still at least do something. Nijire effortlessly blocked his strike and countered with one of her own. It was almost painfully slow, as Nijire demonstrated far more control than he gave her credit for. Still, it was too fast for Izuku to really do anything, and he ended up shrugging to the side and taking the blow with his shoulder. Her palm only hurt because his muscles were so sore that nearly everything felt like it was bruised. Still he saw his chance. He brought his hands down and grabbed onto her belt, and attempted to throw her. It was like trying to lift a house. Nijire patted his head and then grabbed his arms. With a small kick to his leg, Nijire pulled him down with her laughing before they landed onto the floor once again. Good job. You got me. He was on top of her. His face was pressed tight enough into her to see, he could feel the outline of the sports bra she wore. This position. The legendary position that felt like it only came out in manga. The experience of having a girl under him. He saw Nijire's calm, almost knowing smile as she tilted her head slightly as he stared down at her. The strain of his arms had all but vanished along with his will to move much further. Covered in sweat and breathing softly, Nijire looked so appealing that it nearly broke his 13-year-old mind. The revelation that he had a full-blown crush on her was promptly buried under the presence he felt behind him. More ki than he had ever felt radiated from some beast behind him. Normally, ki just felt slightly warm, and in Nijire's case felt a bit bubbly. But this ki felt like a finely honed dagger being pressed at the back of his neck. What the hell do you think you're doing to my granddaughter, you punk? A gruff voice shouted, and Izuku could already feel his soul leaving his body. Still, his body heeded the man's commands and Izuku stood faster than he ever had in this gravity and looked towards the source of the ki. With muscles that looked like rocks and spiky black hair that stood straight up into an aggressive cone, Izuku recognized this man from the photos he had been shown. This was Vegeta, Nijire's grandfather. And, if the footage Izuku had seen from the martial arts tournament was anything to go by, he was the only man that could stand toe-to-toe with Goku. Sorry, Izuku muttered, then the room began to spin and he felt like all the BLD in his head just dropped as vertigo kicked in. He stumbled and then fell forward, only for Nijire to catch him in the blink of an eye. Grandpa, Nijire shouted, would you stop that? You're scaring him. Good. Vegeta grew closer. There's no way I'm going to let some little punk like that have his way with my little princess. Grandpa, Nijire pouted and glared at him while helping Izuku stand back up. You act like I can't take care of myself. What? No, that's not it. And you trained me, didn't you? So you should know how strong I am. Nijire hummed and smiled down at Izuku. Besides, it was my fault Izuku was on top of me. The hell is an Izuku? Izuku managed to gather just enough of his senses to raise a hand and say Kyo. However, he did not have enough senses to realize that was a bad idea. That human. Vegeta sneered and crossed his arm. What are you doing with him anyways? He's my friend, Nijire said proudly, her bright blue eyes shining with a bit of magic to them. And we're training so he can fly. What? Doesn't he have one of those abilities? What are they called again? Quirks. Izuku offered as he stood to his own 2 feet. No one asked you, punk? Vegeta huffed and glared at Izuku. The ki was so thick that Izuku felt like he was choking. It felt like it was squeezing down on some part of him that he couldn't quite feel. What was it? But yeah, Quirks. Don't you have one of those? No, Izuku answered with a bit more confidence than he used to. I'm quirkless. Vegeta rolled his eyes. Great, so you're weak even for a human. Grandpa, Nijire hummed with a bit of anger in her tone. What? It's true. Vegeta huffed and turned his head to the side. Humans with enough potential manifest a quirk? Krillin didn't? What's that baldy have to do with this? He's human. What? He is. I thought he was just some kind of short alien that ended up here by accident like Piccolo. Grandpa, Nijire shouted and stomped her foot. Stop being a JRK to my friend. For a long moment, Vegeta glared at him before he sighed and looked away. The general aura of menace around him vanished. Fine. And? Nijire pressed. And what? Vegeta sneered. Izuku straightened his back and tried to be as confident as possible. Honestly, all the training he'd been doing with Nijire helped a lot with that, though a lot of that could just be the fact that he had a friend that actually kind of accepted him. Mr. Vegeta, sir. That's Prince Vegeta to you. Prince Vegeta? Izuku gave a small respectful bow. I'm not much now, but I'm going to keep training with Nijire until I'm strong enough to fly, And even then I'm going to keep training until I can keep up with her. Ha. Vegeta tossed his head back and let out a laugh. Wait, was it just Izuku, or did he kind of sound like an angrier version of All Might? Ha. Finally some goddamn respect. Izuku looked towards Nijire, hoping that the confusion he felt was plainly written on his face. My dad says that Grandpa has a big ego and that we shouldn't feed it. Ha. Vegeta continued to laugh like he hadn't even heard them. And he's got the ball to stand up to me. Vegeta looked Izuku in the eye and kept grinning. You got ball, punk, I'll give you that. Well, he is a boy. Nijire muttered. Thank you, sir. Izuku responded with a bit more force. So, Vegeta gave Izuku a solid poke to the shoulder. What's your goal? Why are you training? The intensity in Vegeta's eyes was off-putting to say the least, and Izuku wanted nothing more than to run away, but Nijire's hand squeezing his arm held him in place and fortified his position. I don't want to be weak anymore. Good. Vegeta's smile spread and it turned into something that was far more unnerving than Izuku thought a smile could be. It didn't help that Vegeta's eyes were wide, and his eyebrows looked sharp enough to cut a rock. But what's your goal? It was a recent thing. Ever since Nijire had shown him the world's martial arts videos, he had been hooked. He still wanted to be a hero, but just as much, he wanted to compete. I want to be a hero, he said slowly, and clutched at the air in front of his heart. And I want to compete in the World Martial Arts Tournament. Vegeta's smile turned into a contemplative frown and he turned away from both him and Nijire. That fool Kakarot doesn't have a fully fledged apprentice yet. Both of his boys are more the product of Piccolo, and Trunks has too much of his mother in him. My little princess is going to need a strong rival if she's going to carry on the Scion race. What's he talking about? Izuku asked Nijire. I have no idea. She admitted. Was another reason why Izuku wanted to train, and that was because he could spend time with Nijire, and he wanted to be just as strong as her. Even if it wasn't possible, he still wanted to try. Do you really want to compete in the world's martial arts tournament? Nijire asked him, her head tilted to the side in her usual expression of endless curiosity. Yeah. I mean, I might not stand a chance, but the next one is in 5 years, right? Izuku asked, trying to remember how exactly the tournament schedule worked. It seemed random at first, but it had started to get consistent again recently. I want to be strong enough to fight you in the finals. Oh. Nijire jumped up and started floating. That sounds like a great idea. We should train lots then so you can get super strong. Izuku nodded. That's it. Vegeta snapped his fingers and pointed towards Izuku. From this day forth, you're my new apprentice? Izuku could feel his bones begin to preemptively break themselves. You heard me, Pa. If I can train you, some human that was too weak to even manifest a quirk, then I'll be able to get one up on that fool Kakarot. Vegeta dropped into a fighting stance and smiled. Call it gratitude towards the respect you showed me. Now, show me what you can do. But... No. Nijire stepped between him and her grandfather. I've been training with Izuku all day, and he's about to pass out. What? But princess? No. Nijire huffed. Besides, we still have to study. Study? What are you, Gohan? Jeech, I knew I should have taken you with me to train instead of leaving you with your father and mother. Now it was Vegeta's turn to pout, which was a bit strange, considering how his face still seemed to be scowling. So much wasted potential. Oh. Nijire clapped her hands again and smiled. Why don't you train both of us tomorrow, Grandpa? That sounds like a lot of fun. Fine. Vegeta barked and walked over to the control panel. But you both better give it your all. Now if you're done with the gravity chamber, get going. I'm about to turn on 150 times gravity. 150 times. For several different reasons, that didn't seem possible. Nijire let out a squeak and grabbed Izuku's arm. That's more than I've ever felt. Let's go. Izuku allowed himself to get dragged out of the room by Nijire flying as fast as she could. You're aware I'm human, right? Painfully so. Vegeta shouted. And if you have the energy to complain, you have the energy to train. Now keep walking, Ba. Izuku grunted and slammed his leg down in front of him. Each step was somehow both harder and easier than the last, as Vegeta's most recent training regime involved turning the gravity up and just forcing Izuku to run around the training room. At first, Izuku had been pinned down to the ground, but after a lecture about what exactly human limits were from both Nijire and Bulma, Vegeta had elected to turn the gravity down. Mostly because his pride wouldn't allow him to kill his first ever pupil that wasn't directly related by BLD. Apparently, the urge to train someone and pass techniques down was something that most Scions experienced as they got older. Vegeta turned a very pretty shade of red when Nijire asked if it was like Memps. Yes, sure. Izuku shouted as he continued his long, shambling march around the training room. Nijire was there too. Her long blue hair was tied into a tight ponytail that bounced with her every step as she jogged along the same path he was. He had stopped counting how many times he had actually been lapped, he just enjoyed her company. That's right. Vegeta shouted and nodded to himself. His own body was dripping with sweat as he did upside-down sit-ups, hanging from a bar with enough weights in each hand to outweigh a car. And yet Vegeta acted like they were nothing. And Princess, when Trunks was your age, he was already able to go Super Saiyan. Can you not do that yet? Nijire stopped in her tracks and tilted her head at Vegeta. A chance to catch up. He just needed her to stay still for the next century. That's when you get all powered up and your hair turns blonde, right? It's not blonde. It's gold. There's a difference. Meh. Nijire shrugged, like that was all. Dad tried to teach me that, but I like my hair like it is, so I don't want to learn it. What? Are you freaking serious right now, Nijire? Vegeta twisted his entire body to look Nijire in the eyes. I can hear you slowing down, keep going. Yes, sure. It was one of the many titles that Izuku could call Vegeta that would appease him slightly, even if it did feed his ego. It didn't feel like his bones were going to break anymore, but it still felt like he was trying to walk through water. Really heavy water. Yeah. Nijire chirped. I'd look super duper weird with gold hair or whatever. Besides, apparently it also makes your hair, like, super spiky and angry looking, and can you imagine how I'd look if all this, Nijire waved her hair aggressively in the direction of her grandpa, was going straight up. I wouldn't be able to do anything. Besides, I can already do the glowy eye thing too. What glowy eye thing? When you go super blonde mode. Nijire opened and closed her hands in front of her eyes like it was a mouth. Your eyes get all glowy and super blue and stuff. Apparently it turns Mom on a lot. Here, watch. Nijire squeezed her eyes and hummed for a moment, her hair going wild and her ki flooding the room for a few long and painful footsteps, before she opened her eyes again. Nijire always had super pretty eyes that were like gems reflecting a pure blue sky filled with stars, but this time they were glowing with an alluring power that made her a true alien beauty. See? Yes, very pretty. But you should learn how to turn super. Don't wanna? Nijire jumped up on her heels and started to jog again. Teach it to Izuku. He's human. So, it's in the name. Vegeta shouted to the ground, his arms fully extended as Izuku could see a brand new gray hair slowly creeping its way along Vegeta's massive hairline. Super Saiyan. If he did something similar, it'd be called superhuman. Honestly, that just made it sound like normal superpowers. Like quirks. I can hear you snickering, punk. Izuku let out a yelp that the low gravity turned into a groan as he took another step. At this point, he was nearly running on sheer willpower. He needed food. A lot of food. More food than he'd ever eaten at once. Which was probably half of what Nijire was having for dinner. Grandpa. He has a name. If you keep calling him punk, he's going to go get a tattoo and join the Yakuza. Nijire pouted as she passed Izuku. Wait, actually, that sounds hot. Minus the crime thing. What? Would you prefer I call him whelp? Or how about human? Vegeta sneered and resumed his own workout. Izuku had heard of a 6-pack, but he'd never seen someone with an 8-pack. And he still hadn't because he wasn't sure it was possible to count the number of abs Vegeta had. Oh, you should call him Izuku. Nijire laughed as she continued her jog. A bit of sweat was staining her clothes, which filled Izuku with just a bit of pride. I'll call him that when he earns it. Vegeta stopped for a moment and glared at Izuku. And that's a long way off. Isn't that right, punk? That's right, Shursho. Izuku repeated again as he could feel his legs giving up on him. Honestly, it was his whole goddamn body at this point. Every single muscle was in a whole new world of soreness that made his training with Nijire seem like child's play. Izuku smiled for a moment and stared at Nijire. Don't worry, Nijire, I'll make him say my name eventually. Ha! Vegeta let out a laugh that Izuku had come to accept as the good kind of amusement. It meant he had said something that Vegeta could respect. It was a trick that Bulma had taught him. A few moments of silence passed as they continued their training. At this point, Izuku had gotten so many wins he really didn't know what to make of it. All right, princess. Vegeta grunted as he moved onto the ground. He stretched a bit and waved Nijire over. Come here, we're going to spar. And you, punk, make sure you watch. And keep those legs moving. Izuku had seen Nijire and Trunks fight a few times. He had even seen Trunks and Vegeta go at it, which was a whole new level of crazy, but Nijire sparring with Vegeta was new. It was slow, less fighting for the sake of fighting and more instructional. You call that a punch? Put your back into it. And a bit more yelly. Hey Grandpa, Nijire sat on her but, panting after her one-on-one sparring session with Vegeta, is this how you trained when you were a kid? Not at all. Vegeta patted on his head with a towel, which looked nice. But even if they were on a break, the gravity was still up, leaving Izuku barely able to breathe as he laid against the central pillar. Back on planet Vegeta, seriously. We didn't have a gravity chamber like this. Only those of the elite class were trained on the planet. Those of lesser castes were sent to other planets to conquer as infants. That made Izuku sit up. He knew that Vegeta was technically an alien prince, that or everyone that owned Capsule Corp was playing a joke on him or were on crazy pills, but he hadn't been aware of what that really implied. By the time I was your age, I had already conquered over a dozen planets. Vegeta crushed the water bottle in his hand and let out a growl. Though by that point, there were less than 5 of us still alive, and our planet had been destroyed. What happened to it? Izuku asked before Nijire could. I know. Can I tell him? Nijire jumped up. Vegeta stared at her for a moment then nodded. Nijire spun on her heel and looked at Izuku with a great big smile on his face. So, there was this bad guy that was trying to take over the universe or something. His name was Freezer. Frieza, Vegeta corrected. Yeah, that guy. He was super duper powerful and stuff, and he was afraid that one of the Scions would be strong enough to beat him, so he decided to destroy the whole planet. But don't worry, Grandpa Goku beat him, and then my dad beat him again, but this time with a sword, and he's dead. Point being, you Earthlings have it easy. Vegeta crossed his arms. I had to be strong to survive. Here you just have to be able to sit at a desk for 10 hours a day. Vegeta touched his chin and hummed for a few seconds. That's a bad sound. Nijire warned. Izuku couldn't help but nod. Well, he wanted to nod, but he couldn't bring his head up after he moved it down. All right, punk, rest up. No training for the next 2 days. That includes whatever the hell you and my little princess were doing before I showed up. Your body needs time to recover. Hell, that might even give you a bit more motivation once you see what your body can do when it's not constantly feeling like you're going to break. Vegeta let out a laugh and began to fiddle with the computer. With what I put you through, I'm honestly surprised you haven't sensed your own energy yet. Grandpa. Nijire started glaring at Vegeta for a few moments. You're not planning on taking Izuku to some alien world and forcing him to survive, are you? No, but that's a great idea for the summer. Vegeta shouted, a bit of excitement in his voice. I'll have to talk to that woman. She won't let me take the spaceship after I blew up the last one. You're damn right I won't, Vegeta? Bulma's voice carried over the intercom. Those things are expensive. And I'm too old to build a new one every time you decide to treat them like one of your space pods. What the? Vegeta jumped back from the computer and entered a fighting stance for half a second. Woman, were you spying on us? Oh, I called to tell Izuku his mother called. And just so happened to hear you. Bulma coughed, and the roughness of her voice vanished. Izuku, your mother called and said that she won't be home tonight. She asked if we could take you in for the night. Nijire spoke first. Wait, does that mean I can have a sleepover? It sure does, sweetie. Bulma laughed. A sleepover. With Nijire. But, girl, crush. Hey, did you hear that, Izuku? Nijire bounced over and grabbed his hands. That means we can stay up all night eating snacks, watching movies, and all that other stuff. Despite his blush, Izuku managed to nod. Yeah, that sounds like a blast, Nijire. Izuku felt a shiver run down his spine as Vegeta grabbed onto his shoulder. Enjoy it while you can, punk? The evil laugh Vegeta gave haunted Izuku's dreams that night. Izuku stood in the same garden that he had landed in the first time along with Nijire. The hole she had blasted into the garden with her energy blast had long since vanished, and new plants were already in full bloom. The progress of this training had already started to show itself, and now that he had gotten a day or two of rest, Izuku could actually appreciate how light he felt, especially compared to the gravity chamber. It also felt good knowing that he actually had more than a bit of muscle definition, which was more than what he could say for a lot of his classmates, with the exception of Katsuki, who was still a lot more fit than him. But not for long. And when Izuku could finally learn to fly, the thought of it alongside Nijire's infectious optimism, and his growing crush on her, were what kept him going. That and a stubborn resolve to not disappoint Vegeta, though that was also out of fear. Vegeta was scary. And right now, it was just Izuku and Vegeta. Good morning, Shursho. Izuku bowed in the way that Vegeta had insisted he bowed, a fist in the palm of one hand and no more than 45-degree bend. Yes, it is a fine morning, isn't it? Vegeta gave a gruff nod and kept his eyes towards the sky, his muscle-bound arms folded tightly across his knees. He was wearing the usual black jumper he trained in, and had those strange pointy boots as well. A fine morning to test your resolve and see if you've been wasting my time. The glare Vegeta gave Izuku made him feel unworthy of pretty much everything. Unworthy to be standing here, unworthy to be wearing these training clothes, unworthy of the air he was breathing, and unworthy of the hair growing out of his head. Izuku winced and then steeled himself under that fiery glare. I won't let you down, Shursho, Izuku said with far more firmness than he was expecting. Vegeta gave a short grunt and nodded, his eyes turning skyward as well. See that you don't. Your success today determines the future of your training. Succeed, and we'll start teaching you how to properly fight. Izuku didn't want to know what failure would mean. So, what are we going to do today? And where's Nijire? Shopping with her grandmother, Vegeta waved the notion away. She's too much of a distraction, Vegeta paused. For everyone, and today you'll need to focus and remain. We'll be going over some ancient Scion training techniques for harvesting energy today. I thought Scions could use their energy from Barch. The warriors could, but there were some that didn't make the cut. Vegeta held out his hand. Now come here and hold on tight. Izuku did as he was told, and instantly regretted it. Katsuki had a cat that was simply called Cat. It was a large black fluffy cat with green eyes. One time during a sleepover, Cat had flopped down in front of Izuku, its fluffy belly exposed. Thinking it was an invitation to pet her tummy, Izuku made a terrible mistake. He could still see the scars from where Cat had clawed him. It had been a trap. And he got that same feeling as when Vegeta grabbed his arm and held on tight. Before Izuku could so much as muster a protest, they were rocketing into the sky at a fast and steady rate. Izuku looked down at the quickly shrinking ground. You're not going to drop me from really high up, are you? I am, Vegeta said in a firm voice. Right, warrior culture where the strong ruled and they conquered planets for a living. Why was he not surprised that Vegeta was going to do this? Chances are the reason this training existed was because if they tossed a weak kid and they died, they lost nothing. Can we talk about this? I can drop you now and you'll have less time to figure out how to fly. I'm pretty terrified by that logic. Good. They ascended above the clouds to the point where Izuku could barely even see Capsule Corp, and Izuku realized why Nijire wasn't here. She'd probably complain about this, or try to help him, or tell Bulma, or tell Trunks, or, like, anyone that was saner than the Prince of Science. Which apparently wasn't Izuku, since he had more or less agreed to this. Is there some way I can talk you out of this? Izuku looked down at the ground while dangling from Vegeta's firm grip. His body swayed as Vegeta extended his arm. Sure, start flying, or even use some energy on me and I'll be able to take you down so we can start the real training. Vegeta smirked. Well, I'm waiting. Izuku kicked his legs training to get an ounce of energy flowing through his body, but he couldn't even feel it with Vegeta right next to him. It was like a candle next to a floodlight. An unlit candle. He closed his eyes trying to search inside himself for that energy. Trying to find what he could feel in Nijire, Vegeta, and Trunks. That key. Then he felt himself falling. And when he opened his eyes, he saw that he was indeed falling. Mostly because he felt the air force his limbs in weird directions while the ground grew ever closer. He shouted. He wanted to shout more words like, F you Vegeta, but the words were stolen from him as his jaw slammed shut. Probably wasn't a good idea to swear at the one person that could save him right now. Though, somehow he doubted it. He shouldn't have agreed to training without reading the fine print first. His body tumbled in the air, the sky and the ground switching every couple of seconds as he caught the wind at odd angles. He needed to right himself. How did skydivers fall when they wanted to go slow? He pulled his limbs in and straightened himself, with his back to the ground as Vegeta kept getting smaller and smaller in his eyesight. He flew through a cloud and lost sight of him. How high were the clouds? Didn't matter, ground. Somehow he twisted his body and faced the ground again. His limbs were spread to their maximum while his training uniform kept catching the air and nearly throwing him from side to side. Well, this was it. This was how he was going to die. Murdered by someone rich enough that they could probably do so legally. At least he wasn't screaming and crying. Izuku extended his fingers, his body as stretched out as he could get it. Then he felt it. That same power he had felt in Nijire and Vegeta. His candle had lit itself, and now stood out in the darkness of his own body. He grabbed that flame, feeling it burn throughout his entire body. He tried to control, to direct it downwards to push him back up, and for a moment it worked, only he twisted in the air as one side had more energy than the other. It worked, but he was still going to die. He twisted in the air and stared at the ground as he grew ever closer. He was running out of time. He could grab his key, but he didn't know what to do with it. How did it feel when Nijire did those energy blasts? She gathered the energy in the palm of her hand and then released it. If he could gather enough energy, he might be able to slow himself down right before he hit the ground. That was his best chance, especially if he managed to push himself up as it happened. Best case scenario, he got a few broken limbs. Worst case was death. Izuku let out a breath and aimed a hand downward. He pushed his energy and found that it flowed freely to the palm of his hand. A light appeared, a small flickering light that was like a candle in a typhoon. It wasn't much, not even a fraction of what Nijire could casually call up, but it would have to do. The ground was getting close. Far too close. He needed to do this now. To both his relief and his surprise, that ball of light shot out of his hand faster than he could throw a ball, its form traveling towards the ground where it blew a small hole into the ground. A far cry from the explosion he needed. What's more, that was all his energy. His vision began to fade as he saw the ground get closer. This was it. He was going to be a stain. Any second now in crunch. Where was the crunch? For a human, that's a pretty decent-sized hole you blew in my garden. Vegeta's firm voice penetrated the fog Izuku felt. A moment later, he felt the soft morning dew grass on his face as Vegeta dropped him like a sack of potatoes. But that was all your energy. Pathetic by Saiyan standards. Izuku groaned, fighting against the darkness as he saw Vegeta staring at something in the ground. There were a lot more dirt chunks than Izuku had initially thought. He pushed himself off the ground just enough to see his hole. Barely half a meter wide, it was by far the most impressive thing he had done with his life. He smiled and placed his head back into the grass. Rest up, boy, once you get your energy back the real training starts. He could shoot AF energy blast. You did what? Izuku had never actually seen Nijire angry before, and he was grateful for that, because she was terrifying. Her eyes glowed, her hair flew in a wind that wasn't there, and her ki felt like a hot knife. But at the same time, it was also kind of hot. Especially since all that anger was directed towards Vegeta. And it wasn't just Nijire, Trunks, Bulma, and Mai were all there glaring at Vegeta with their hands on their hips. Dropped him? Vegeta replied without so much as a shrug. He had remained leaning against the room Izuku had been resting in like there was nothing wrong with his actions. I did the same thing to you. What? Trunks screamed, stepping forward, hands now balled into fists at his own sides. You dropped Nijire. She was able to use her ki since she could walk. You're welcome. Mai looked done with him. Bulma looked done with him. Trunks looked extra done with him. Nijire looked confused. How could you? Oh, I'm sorry. Have I ever given you any indication that I'm a good father? Vegeta shouted and the entire room fell silent. Look, there's no better way to unlock ki than for the person to need it. I did that with Izuku. And now he can actually use what little ki he has. So now we can start training it. This is what he wanted. Trunks sighed and placed his palm against his head. I should have known better. What? His life wasn't in any real danger. Do you think I'm too slow that I can't catch a falling child? Vegeta pointed southward. I fly to the South Pole every time Bulma tells me to cool off. That's where you go? Bulma asked. Vegeta gave a quick nod. And do you really think I'd be so foolish as to kill my own apprentice? I knew he could do it. Well, that was a confidence boost. I just expected him to fly, not blast a hole in the garden. And there it went. Izuku held up his hand and drew the attention of everyone in the room. Thus far he had been treated like some kind of a hospital patient and was being showered with food and not being allowed out of the bed. Sure, he passed out a couple of hours ago, but he was feeling completely fine now. Better than fine even. Does it help that I'm not mad at him? Trunks let out a sigh and pinched the bridge of his nose. Izuku, look, I understand all of this is exciting for you, but please don't encourage my father. For all I know, he could be planning on taking you off-world to fight giant monsters this summer. Nijire let out a gasp and looked towards Vegeta, all anger gone on her face. She practically vibrated where she stood. Trunks groaned. Nijire? No. Duh. I understand why it was bad. Izuku held out his hand and gathered his ki there. A light appeared for just a moment before it flickered out. I mean, I almost died, but I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Told you he was fine with it. He barely even screamed. Vegeta gave a short laugh, then glared at Izuku. You did swear at me. You dropped me from the stratosphere. So, I'm still going to put you through hell for that. Hell was a scion named Vegeta. The amount of training Vegeta was forcing onto him felt like it was made for someone that wasn't human, which, to Vegeta's credit, was pretty true. Izuku was just a human being trained like a scion. Scions. A race that were apparently planet-conquering badasses or something, and now there were just a handful of pure-blooded scions left. What the hell's wrong with you, Deku? Izuku pulled his face up from his desk and saw that not only was Katsuki staring at him, all of his other classmates were as well. For the most part, they had stopped laughing at him once he started to actually build muscle, which, considering the whole magic fuckery that was the gravity chamber, was happening faster than it should have. That, and there was a connection between his ki and his physical form. Izuku looked at Katsuki and tilted his head to the side for a few seconds. What? Katsuki clicked his tongue and let out an annoyed explosion before placing his hand onto Izuku's desk. I'm asking you what the hell is wrong with you. For the past few weeks you've literally been sleeping in F class. And because a bunch of dumbass decided to make me the class president, I gotta F deal with you slacking. So spill the beans, what the hell is up with you? He heard a bunch of his other classmates talking about it once or twice. Yeah, sorry, I've just been training a lot. He said slowly and then shook his head. But don't worry, I'm still studying. I'm actually studying a lot actually. I made sure of that. So, I won't fail any tests or training. Katsuki growled and leaned in close. What kind of training? Oh, Izuku went to scratch his head but stopped when his sleeve tightened around his arm. Well, I just, since I'm quirkless and all and can't become a hero, I figured I'd try for the world's martial arts tournament. Those once bitter words no longer held the same sting. He still didn't quite understand why only quirkless people could use their ki like Mai, the scion, half scion, and Nijire didn't count based on their being part alien, or all of the other people Nijire had mentioned, but he had an idea. Quirks were probably the unique ways that people's ki manifested. but that was largely based on Vegeta ranting, which wasn't quite a reputable source. In the world's martial arts tournament, you know that they allow quirks in that, right? That's even dumber than you being a hero. Katsuki let out a short laugh, but he was the only one that laughed. That was pretty fresh. Katsuki slapped his hand on the desk and got right in Izuku's face. At least you're applying yourself though, but stop sleeping in the F class so I don't have to put up with the teacher asking me to do something about it. But was that encouragement? Kind of. That feels like something Vegeta would say to him. Izuku just smiled and nodded. Yeah, I'll try not to fall asleep in class. With that, Katsuki sneered and went back to his desk where he proceeded to look angry at the entire world. It shouldn't matter too much. Once he got stronger he'd have more energy and be able to stay awake through class. But for right now, he stretched and let out a yawn while twisting his neck slightly. His eyes were already heavy and he was going to go train again later today. Maybe he'd be able to find some place nice to sleep during lunch. The roof where he met Nijire seemed like a good place. Just not near the edge. Izuku. Brock, the physically largest member of their class and Izuku's in-class neighbor, leaned over across the aisle. His nearly permanently shut eyes were opened slightly to reveal his reddish gold eyes. Brock's quirk, heroic body, was one of the strongest in the class and the only person that Katsuki wouldn't mess with. Brock. Izuku looked around to make sure the large student was talking to him. He really was. Well, he did say his name, but at the same time Izuku sounded a lot like you Izuku, which could be someone's name. Or not. What's up? You're really aiming for the world's martial arts tournament? Brock asked, his giant pecs as he spoke. Why was he allowed to be shirtless? He had pants that fit, but Brock just always went around shirtless and no one seemed to give a damn. Yeah, Izuku nodded and rubbed the back of his head again. Right on. Brock held out his large and muscular fist. I'm aiming for the same thing, so good luck to ya. Oh, Izuku bounced his fist off of Brock's rock-sturdy one. Right back at you. Oh, I don't need luck. You can't be afraid, Nijire whispered in his ear. The thick cloth blindfold prevented him from actually seeing, but he could still sense Nijire hovering around him, just as he could feel the light breeze on his face and the soft grass under his feet. But it was more than all of that. He could sense her ki, the overflowing life force that Nijire and all of the Scions seemed to ooze. But most of all, he felt her soft hands touching his as they attempted some new form of training. It had been over a year and a half since Nijire had grabbed him by his hand and flew him into her world of aliens, gravity chambers, androids, and a grandpa that could just casually fly to the moon. The improvements to his body had been drastic. He had defined muscles, and he had even grown a fair bit taller. But that was just the byproduct and the building blocks of the real prize, accessing his own ki. Quirks, as it turned out, were the physical manifestation of people's ki. They were specialized, and in many cases easier to use than ki, but Izuku's ki was raw, pure, and could be used in several different ways. So far he could use ki-tied general self-enhancement, which was the easiest mode and something that he had already been doing since he started training in the gravity room. Likewise, he could also use his ki defensively in the form of deflecting energy blasts from others, which was really only useful against like 6 people. The most amazing application, and something that could be considered a quirk in and of itself, was being able to produce his own ki blasts. Where before a single blast would be enough to make him pass out, now he could probably produce a dozen in a row and only need a rest. But there was still one hurdle. Flying. He felt Nijire lift up on his hands, his cheeks burning at the soft, tender, almost not even their touch, while his lips tingled with the thought of kissing Nijire. Over a year of having a crush on her, and he still hadn't acted. No matter how much he trained, no matter how much his personality grew, it always felt like she was just out of his reach. She was amazing. Izuku, Nijire hummed from in front of him, her ki bouncing as she lifted off the ground. It was strong not to smile at her light giggle. The BLNDFLD is to stop you from being distracted. Now his cheeks felt even hotter. Sorry, he breathed and steadied himself. His ki flew around his body, expanding throughout it, then turning into a river which he directed towards his hands and held it there. A warm light broke through the cloth as his gathered energy appeared between his and Nijire's hands. I'm good. Nijire floated up a bit, her hands pressing against his as he braced for the familiar sensation of being pulled up. Good, because I really want to go flying with you. We can go on an adventure since it's summer too. Adv. His question got cut off as he felt Nijire pull upwards, guiding him up as she ascended into the air. He had to focus his ki back around his entire body, and the sensation of the grass peeling away from his bare feet told him that he was ascending from Nijire's light touch on his hands. This was what he had managed to achieve so far. Enough lift to make it so that he was nearly weightless, but not quite enough to go up on his own. Nijire's flying ability was something else though. She was so graceful with it, her ki barely even moving as she did so. To her, flying was as natural as breathing. For Izuku, it was like breathing syrup. Focus, Nijire sang as they continued to float upwards, his hands touching hers and bouncing up like he was trying to keep his head above the water in a pool that was just barely too deep for him to stand. Izuku closed his eyes despite already being blinded and doubled down on his own energy. He focused on the upward movement, guiding his body like he was following an invisible string upwards that was stuck to the tip of his nose. That's it, Nijire's words were comforting as he bounced off her hands. Nijire's ki seemed to fade away as he focused on his own ki, feeling it grow even as he pushed it through his entire body and then downward. The ball of his naked feet tingled. His hands felt rigid, frozen in place so as to not lose Nijire's lead, all while his brow remained fixed in stubborn concentration. Hey, Izuku? Nijire asked, her voice like a forest song with how cheerful she was. He asked, barely able to keep his concentration. He felt his BLNDFLD fall from his ears, and he opened his eyes to see Nijire's face upside down to his own, her long blue hair casting a thin shadow over him as she smiled at him. You're doing it. He looked down. Why was the ground so far down? His concentration broke, and he felt himself drop before Nijire dove down and grabbed his hands again. I told you. I knew you could do it. Nijire laughed, spinning in the air and taking him along for the ride while her smile lit up the world. She calmed down quickly and brought him back up to her level again, his hands now resting on hers just as they started. So, show me you can do it again, keep your eyes on me. That was probably the easiest thing in the world to do. Flying is just like riding a bike. Nijire beamed at him. But, neither one of us know how to. Shoo, I'm your sensei now, so no pointing out when I say goofy stuff. He nodded and focused again, this time keeping his eyes fixated on Nijire while he remembered that feeling he had just experienced. With Nijire at the center of his thoughts, he pushed downward, his hands bouncing off of hers. Make sure you keep up. She winked and started to ascend. Her effortless flying made him feel like a brick that was trying to swim, but still he rose up alongside her. The time between their hands touching grew longer and longer until she pulled her hands back, smiling at him as she slowly floated backwards. She seemed to stop in the air, frozen in time like she was in the middle of a free fall, her long blue hair trailing after like a comet tail. Nijire was so appealing. She waved towards him, beckoning him closer in a way that had his cheeks burning. He dropped his hands, leaning forward slightly as he moved towards Nijire. The motion wasn't forced, or even intentional, he simply felt drawn to her. That chance encounter they had on the rooftop so long ago had led to this single appealing moment as he was actually flying with Nijire for the first time. Nijire let out a squeal, her arms and legs flailing as she was simply too excited to keep it all inside. Izuku joined her call, laughter bubbling up from inside of him as he floated gently in the air. Then he stopped. He dropped nearly a meter before he caught himself and climbed back up to Nijire. I guess I still have a lot to learn. That's a good thing. She exploded and flew around him like she was inspecting something new for the first time. He felt her gaze linger on his body before she returned to face him, her bubbly smile too perfect. It's really fun to teach you. But now we can go for morning flights and stuff. She grabbed his hand for a moment, holding it up towards her. Since when had his hands been so much bigger than hers? Her smile turned small as she stared at his hand. This strange, tranquil moment lasted for but a moment before Nijire floated away, her fingers trailing along his hand as her smile grew more infectious. Now come on. If you catch me, I'll model my bikini for you. He dropped like a rock before chasing after a laughing Nijire. Even if it was a hopeless endeavor, he still felt like he needed to catch her, now more than ever. From his fingers to his toes, every single part of his body was feeling a new kind of pain brought about by a full-body exhaustion, fatigued from using far too much ki in a single day. He had chased and flown with Nijire for what felt like hours until he crashed into the pool right in front of Bulma. She gave him a 10 on the height and a 2 on the form. Now he was half-resting in the pool. His weighted shirt had been casually tossed to the side, and his training pants already felt twice as heavy as before, but there was no way he was going to take them off. The water was just warm enough to make the early summer days seem perfect. Nimstar Izuku, a robotic butler that was little more than a slender black glass head and long slender arms mounted on top of a smooth black sphere, placed a glass of lemonade next to him, followed by a few easy-to-eat snacks. Mrs. Bulma said you might need this? Thank you. Izuku nodded towards the robot and grabbed the lemonade. He wasn't sure how or even why, but Capsule Corp had the best lemonade ever. He was afraid to ask how, because he was pretty sure that the answer would be something involving aliens. He took a sip and nearly rolled his eyes before he nodded towards Bulma on the other side of the pool, still relaxing in the shade. Thanks. Don't mention it. She waved at him. You practically live here now, and that means I gotta make sure you don't drown. By the way, nice bod, you look like my ex when he was younger, only a whole lot cuter. Bulma gave a sharp cackle of a laugh that had Izuku's cheeks feeling warm. And that was just the warm-up. Nijire walked into the pool area like a runway model. Her every step had more than enough bounce to make her hair swish back and forth like a metronome, and she held a pair of folded towels on one arm while the other swayed with her hips. Nijire had always been cute and often downright appealing, but right now, dressed in a swimsuit, he became all the more aware that while he had grown, she had also grown. The swimsuit she was wearing wasn't small by any means. It was a light blue that had fluffy frills covering some of it, and even a miniature skirt that hugged her hips, but it was still showing off a lot of skin. A lot of skin. Nijire hummed, walking past him as she tossed the 2 towels onto the chairs behind him. She continued onward towards the diving board and climbed up, casually stretching as she did so. It was almost like she was putting on a show. Bulma clapped her hands and stood. Alright, I'm heading in. Don't do anything I wouldn't do, you two. We won't. Nijire waved back to her grandma. Bulma pouted. Oh come on, at least react when I tease you. I'd tease Izuku more, but I'm half scared that would kill him. Izuku felt his cheeks burn as he pulled his gaze away from Nijire to look at Bulma's teasing smile. The sound of the diving board being used drew Izuku's attention back towards Nijire so fast he felt his neck pop. He caught Nijire mid-jump, her body twisting in the air as easily as she flew, before she dived down into the water with barely a splash. He waited with bated breath for her to resurface, but instead caught a glimpse of her swimming towards him. Pwah! Nijire let out a breath as she surfaced right in front of him. Great idea on the pool, Izuku. His cheeks felt warm enough to turn the pool into a hot tub. It wasn't on purpose? Oh, I know. Nijire stood in the water, her seat barely sticking above the small waves that had started forming. But when I saw you land safely, I knew it was a good idea. But hey, what do you think of my swimsuit? I thought you were only going to model it if I caught you. I'm not modeling, I'm swimming. There's a huge difference. Oh. He glanced down at her body distorted by the water for a moment. It was cute how her wet hair stuck to her like that. It's really cute and it super suits you. Hee, thanks, now come on. Let's swim and stuff. Oh, I have an idea. Nijire held up her hand and formed a perfectly smooth ball of energy that floated in the air like it was a balloon. Come on. Let's play energy volleyball. That sounds like a very bad idea. That's why it's fun. Besides, it also counts as training. Hi. You're upside down. I know. Nijire laughed, her arms hanging above, or was it below? Her head while her hair swished aimlessly from side to side. Despite constant exposure to the rare element known as Nijire, Izuku still hadn't quite worked up any form of immunity against her. Probably because he just liked looking at her. He tried to maintain eye contact despite the fact that her shirt had fallen down low enough that he could see all of her tummy and just a hint of her sports bra. Nijire stuck her tongue out and then flipped back down onto the ground. She landed on her feet and gave a few playful bounces while stretching. Her entire body just seemed like it was meant to move. But hey, you started summer break today, right? Why yeah. Considering how he could fly and more or less shoot energy blasts out from his hands, his stutter had all but vanished. Except when Nijire was around. She just put him on edge. It was a happy-go-lucky kind of edge that made him want to see her more and more, but it was still an edge nonetheless. He placed his bag down in the usual spot and bit his lip. You know what that means, right? Summer reports? No, try again, think more fun. More bikinis? No. Her pout lasted half a second. Well yes, lots of that, but think. What does summer mean? That it's going to be really hot? Adventure? Nijire stomped her feet and pointed towards the table where several capsules were sitting in an open case. Stop being so literal all the time. Oh. Izuku stared at the capsules for a moment. He could recognize a few of the labels: food, water, shelter. Though it was different from the standard survival kits that schools and other shelters had, these looked more custom. So a camping trip. That's what I told everyone else, she whispered, leaning in close while she lifted off the ground slowly. But there's something more important. Come here, I'll show you, and be quiet. Is anybody here? Izuku asked, looking around the condo that Nijire and her immediate family stayed at in the Capsule Corp building. Nope. She laughed and floated over to her bag. I told Grandma that it's been a while since Grandpa took her anywhere, so they decided to go on a cruise or something, and my dad has a business meeting in America or something, so my mom went with him. She made a face, sticking her tongue out and rolling her eyes. I got lectured so much when I told them we were going camping, mostly by my dad. Grandpa just said to make sure I make you train and to not get eaten. Sorry you had to go through that. It'll be worth it, because we're going to do something super duper fun. Nijire gasped and started pulling stuff out of her backpack. It was the simple, rugged type of bag that looked more like a sack with strings attached than any of the fancy things he'd seen others take camping. But then again, those were for people without ready access to capsules. She pulled out a few pieces of clothes, a basic water canteen, tampons, and were those condoms? Izuku felt his cheeks burn as he glared at the bright pink squares Nijire had just casually brought out of her bag. I had to hide it at the bottom. Nijire pulled out an odd device. It was nearly a perfect white circle that tapered up at one end into a large, round button dial, large enough to fit in the palm of Nijire's hand. The device was only about an inch tall, with a green screen that had a square grid built into it. This is what we'll be doing this summer. He was still looking at the condoms. Izuku shook his head and coughed. What is it? It's the dragon radar. We're looking for dragons? No. Nijire flailed her arms and glared at him. Don't you remember all those stories I told you about my grandma and grandpa Goku when they were kids? They went on lots of adventures and fought bad guys while they hunted for Dragon Ball. That he recognized. Oh, I remember now. Aren't those the 7 stones you have to gather for a wish? Yeah. Nijire darted over to him, getting so in his face that he could embrace her if he was brave enough to. She placed the radar in his hands and pressed it against his chest. We're going to find all 7 of them this summer, and then we're going to make a wish. What are we going to wish for? Well, I've been thinking about this a lot. She backed away, her hands behind her back while she hummed. And I know you want to get strong, and I want you to get super strong too, so I think that maybe we should wish for you to become a scion like my grandpa. Or something. Or maybe just wish for you to become strong like him. Oh, why didn't that idea make him feel happy? But we can figure all that out later. Right now it's just going to be fun to go on an adventure. She spun to the table and pulled up a second bag. This one's your bag. We can start flying now if you want. Oh wait, you just got off school. We should go get food first. Oh, and stop by and see your mom. Once again, Izuku felt like he was being helplessly swept up in whatever Nijire had planned. And like always, he was both terrified and excited for it. Flying practice was one thing. It was generally about speed, agility, racing, and dodging. In many ways, it was just sprinting but in the air. Nijire's super awesome and amazing summer adventure of flying, on the other hand, was all about endurance. Even if he was on his own, he'd be struggling to find a pace where he wouldn't get tired, but being followed by Nijire, he felt the pressure to move faster. For some reason, she had put him in charge of the dragon radar, which meant that he was in front the whole time. And the radar was just that, a radar. It didn't show a map of where things were, it just pointed them in a direction with some vague indication of how far away things were. Which wasn't that big of a deal since they could fly. So, Izuku glanced back at Nijire, who had a casual smile on her face, her long hair flowing freely in the wind. What happens if someone finds us and we're somewhere where we shouldn't be? Nijire's face froze as she opened it and stared at him. I didn't think about that. Are you serious? Well, my grandma never told me about stuff like that. Nijire flailed her arms and then blinked. Wait, we can just say we're representatives from Capsule Corporation. Won't we need passports? Stop poking holes in our summer adventure. Fine. Still, it was probably fine, since they could just fly away, and if anything actually did happen, Nijire had several things on her side. Her dad ran one of the most profitable companies, and could probably lawyer her way out of anything, and then there were the big guns. Namely, Vegeta's left and right fist. Izuku glanced towards the sun as it lowered to the horizon. They were still in Japan, at least for the moment, as the closest Dragon Ball had actually been more north than anything taking them through Japan's rural mountains. It was pretty in this area. Was it too soon to ask to rest? Would he even be able to rest knowing that he was going to be sharing a capsule tent with Nijire? Did it have 2 rooms? Why did he feel so unprepared for this? And why did his mom wink at him? Why did Nijire have condoms? Who put those there? Did Nijire know? Of course she knew. She put them back in her bag after looking at them. Why didn't Google have answers for him? It wasn't like he had anybody he could ask for advice on this. Trunks would just be awkward and probably shrug. Mai would tell Nijire. Bulma would laugh and talk about youth or something. His own mother would just make things worse somehow. And if he just asked Nijire, that was so terrifying he didn't even know what to think about it. It wasn't that Nijire was scary, though she certainly could be scary if she tried. She was just too bubbly and happy and wonderful, and he was pretty sure that he was really into her. But asking Nijire if she had feelings for him was easily the scariest thing he'd ever done. And he got dropped from several miles off the ground. Besides, if she did have feelings for him, what the heck was he supposed to do with them? And what the heck was he supposed to do with all the feelings he had for her? Condoms. Hey, Izuku. Nijire floated up beside him, nearly scaring him out of the sky. They slowed to a stop and she pointed towards a gap in the trees behind them. It's getting pretty dark out and I think I saw a good place to set up camp. You want to call it here for tonight? Nijire was a saint. That sounds great. He tried his hardest not to sound tired. He followed Nijire down to her clear spot. The thick trees that surrounded the area and the shade from the mountain made it appear as though the fading day was ending sooner than expected. It was a place filled with natural beauty that already made the trip worth it. But the most unexpected part of this grove was the small hot spring that sat in the rocks. Congratulations, Nijire said as she read a sign someone had placed on one of the rocks. You have discovered my secret hot springs. Feel free to use it, but keep it clean. She spun and laughed at him. I knew I saw something. Now come on. Let's set up and take a dip. But I didn't bring a swim. He was interrupted as Nijire pulled out a capsule and casually tossed it into the air, the button pressed and letting out a beep before their temporary home appeared in a white cloud of steam. It was spherical in nature and smaller than his mother's apartment. However, the roof was a clear dome that looked up to the heavens. Don't worry about it. Nijire opened the door, the light turning on for just a moment as she tossed her bag inside. Besides, who wears a swimsuit to a hot spring? He was about to say something, but every single word in his vocabulary vanished when he saw Nijire take off her training top, revealing the sports bra she had been wearing since this afternoon. She tossed her shirt onto one of the rocks and walked past him, her hands already working on her pants. Stunned, Izuku turned barely in time to catch a peek of Nijire's bare butt as she slowly slid down into the water. She was naked. Nijire turned in the water, her arms bracing against the rock while her butt floated just above the water, her now damp hair covering it slightly. Well, are you going to join me, Izuku? His brain was conflicted. Fortunately, it was outvoted by his heart, his PP, and Nijire's. He slowly took off his shirt and tossed it near Nijire's neat pile of clothes and looked at her looking at him, a soft smile on her face as she casually wiggled her butt. He was dropped from several miles before. What was a bit of NDTY in front of his crush, who was very naked. His sandals were next. And as he went for his pants, he noticed Nijire move in the water, turning away from him for a brief moment of privacy. He placed his pants down softly and gathered his nerves. The water felt good, and he slowly submerged his body into the mineral-rich waters that were just cloudy enough that he could barely see the floor. Nijire moaned, her arms above her head, her pretty, round, and basically perfect melons bounced just above the water. This feels so nice after flying all day. Why yeah, he muttered and caught Nijire looking at him. He instantly looked away and up towards the sky as the day slowly turned to night. Sorry. He heard her move in the water. He sensed her ki drawing closer and closer until he felt her hand touch his under the water. You know you can look, right? I can. He looked. Yep. I get to look too though. She poked his issy, especially since you got muscles now. What? Oh. And she placed a finger on her lips and winked at him. If you ever wanted to touch, I guess I could let you do that too. He wasn't sure what was hotter. The hot spring, his face, or Nijire. Actually wait, that was easy. Nijire. She laughed and stretched her entire body again, her toes poking out of the water for a moment before she relaxed and placed her head on his shoulder. Oh, and by the way, there's only one bed. But no, you're not sleeping on the floor. But we're cuddling. Pay. At some point in the night he had actually managed to fall asleep, despite it at one point feeling far more impossible than actually flying. It wasn't that he was uncomfortable or anything like that. In fact, the bed was amazing, despite being a capsule bed. But really, it was just impossible to sleep when his heart was beating more times per second than when he got dropped from several miles up in the air. Honestly, last night felt like he had a year shaved off of his life. But really it was probably worth it. Izuku stared straight up, both unwilling and unable to move his body for a variety of reasons. The clear dome that served as their roof had given them an excellent view of the night sky, though now it was littered with a few dried leaves and footprints from curious animals. Both his body and mind were locked in two paradoxical states. Physically, he was well rested, rejuvenated, and just all around feeling great, but the long-distant flight they did yesterday had left him feeling drained, and at the same time, it felt like he hadn't actually gotten any sleep and had just skipped from night to morning. Mentally he was all over the place. He had a girlfriend. Nijire was his girlfriend. That was both the most amazing and scariest thing he ever had happened to him, including anything involving Vegeta. He had gone from having a crippling crush on Nijire to... He glanced to his right where Nijire was currently passed out, her arm draped across his ihi, and her mouth wide open while she snored softly. One leg was across both his, while the other was hanging off their bed. The pink top she had worn to bed, that had the tiniest of straps, had rolled up all the way to her melons, exposing her tight tummy, while the matching pink shorts she had on were smaller than his boxers, exposing a lot of thigh. Oddly, despite the fact that she was technically clothed, she somehow felt more exposed than when they had been naked in the hot springs last night. Probably because she was asleep and just really exposed. His cheeks burned with a mixture of guilt and embarrassment, and he continued to stare straight up, waiting for the sun to pierce the trees and blind him, all while being keenly aware of the lump of blue hair just to his right. What was he supposed to do in this situation? He had his incredibly amazing, super hot, super strong girlfriend that was 2 years older than him laying right next to him. And she was more or less naked. Memories from last were so clear he could remember his every breath. He remembered her every breath, the tingling sensation of how touching her softly in different spots felt. He remembered every single one of soft giggles. He could still feel the ghost of their first embrace on his lips, the electric sensation forcing a smile on his face. Brave. Be brave. Have confidence. He twisted his body slowly, his arm that had been forced into a weird angle snaked under Nijire as he turned towards her. Her soft snores stopped and she moved. He froze, watching her as she settled into a new spot, her legs outstretched and her hands brought to her seat, then her mouth closed. He waited for her to stop moving before he resumed. It was a loose, awkward hug at first that he slowly brought in around Nijire, ensnaring her in an early morning cuddle. Hee. His BLD felt like someone had put both the cold and hot water on Max and decided to take a shower. Both boiling hot and icy cold, he stopped and looked at her, and saw something that wasn't there before. A smile. "You're awake, aren't you?" That smile turned into a pout. Nijire's bright blue eyes opened up and she wiggled in their shared bed, moving closer to him. "I was trying to help you." She dove on top of him, her head being buried in his tee while she wrapped her arms around him and snuck a leg between his. "I want to wake up to morning cuddles every day." Izuku swallowed and wrapped his arms against Nijire. The sensation of her being pressed up against him was being repeatedly impressed into his mind. "I think I can do that." She giggled again and looked up at him. "I'll hold you to that." She moved too fast and stole an embrace before he could even process it. For what felt like too long, they laid in that bed, enjoying that rare, calm, peaceful moment brought about by the early morning. "Sorry by the way," she mumbled into his ear, her blue hair serving as a barrier between them. "What for?" "Well," she let out a long sigh. "I mean, I wanted to wait for you. I wanted for you to be brave enough to ask me out. For you to feel ready or something." She kicked her legs. "Or like, wait for the world's martial arts tournament and you're in a tough fight and I tell you and stuff, but I just got really impatient and I wanted this." "Oh," Izuku said softly as he squeezed Nijire tighter. "I'm also super worried that we might not work out. I mean, we're both super duper young and stuff, so we might change or grow apart." She stopped and rubbed her face into his knee before she sighed and looked up at him. A few tears still stained her eyes. "So, sorry for rushing you into this, but every time I think about doing stuff like this I get all excited." Her smile was so pure and wholesome he couldn't bring himself to look away from her. "I'm scared too," he admitted slowly. "But I'm always afraid, I guess. So, thank you. Thank you for taking the first step. I'm really happy about all this, Nijire. And as for growing up, I think that's a good thing. I'm excited to find out who we'll become, because I know that no matter what, we're going to be together." Nijire giggled and leaned up to give him a soft embrace, before she giggled more and more, with each one getting more and more chaotic and louder as she just began to embrace him all over while laughing and hugging him. Her laughter was contagious, and he joined in, hugging onto her while they laughed, tangled in the bed sheets. At last Nijire stopped and placed a hand on his cheek. "Thank you, Izuku." The romance was cut short as Nijire's stomach growled loudly. Izuku scratched his cheek. "I guess we should actually get out of bed, huh? Yep. At least until tonight." Nijire pushed off of him and sat on their bed, giving a long stretch that just enhanced her beauty tenfold. Someone could make a religion out of that. With a hop, she bounced onto the ground and quickly corrected her clothes. "So come on. We got a Dragon Ball to find." Wait. Maybe they could just wish to be together forever. With their camp packed up thanks to Capsule Corp technology, and the coordinates of the hidden hot springs recorded, they took flight, this time with Nijire in the lead. Their pace was slower this time, slower by just enough that it made Izuku feel like it was a mild jog, the kind of thing he could keep up all day. It was a refreshing experience compared to yesterday where he constantly felt like he had to push himself for Nijire. The terrain began to shift as they flew into a large valley that had some unusual stone to accompany it. Rather than the steep mountain slopes found elsewhere in Japan, this place was almost made of pillars of rock topped. With lush vegetation, it almost looked like a piece of China had been pulled out of the earth and plopped down in the middle of Japan. While largely unclaimed wilderness, part of the area near a small house looked like it was being cultivated, and there was even a tractor stopped in a field. Though the weirdest thing was the gigantic flying dinosaur that saw them and ran away. Weren't those supposed to be extinct? Oh. Nijire stopped in the middle of the air, her feet going out in front of her as though to act like brakes. She looked around the area and then looked at the dragon radar again. "It's really close now." She pointed towards a small bamboo forest on a plateau near one of the rock pillars. It's like right over there. That was even closer than I thought it would be. Come on. She let out a burst of energy and shot towards the thick bamboo forest with dizzying speed. But Izuku pointed towards the living fossil that was flying away and let his shoulders slouch. Dinosaur. With a sigh, he followed after Nijire's energy. There was something tranquil about this place. Almost like it was purposefully cultivated that way, though any maintenance had long since been abandoned, as the once clear stone path that led up to the small little hut was now overgrown, though the fence did show signs of an attempted repair at one point. There was even a bucket of water filled with rusted nails sitting just off to the side. Izuku walked the last few steps towards the small square building. It was smaller than his underused bedroom at his mother's house. Really, its size made him think of a garden shack, or some other storage building. Maybe even a shrine, given how high its blue roof was. Izuku. Nijire waved from inside the building. Come here. It's somewhere in here. I just know it is. Izuku rushed over, his steps being that extra bit longer as he floated between them. I think we should be careful, Nijire. This place seems important to someone. Don't worry, she called as she lifted up an ancient bed and looked underneath it, only to be greeted with dust. I'm being respectful. Trespassing wasn't respectful. Despite that, Izuku entered the small building. It really was a place where someone once lived. There was a bed, a tea, and a few other items. A set of clothes and a mask sat on one wall, moths and time having ravaged it to the point where it was little more than threads, but it still held tight. Towards the back of the building was a pedestal, where a dust-covered pillow sat, and resting on the pillow was a perfectly round sphere larger than a softball but still small enough to fit into his hand. It was gray and rock-strong, and despite its rough appearance, it was perfectly smooth. He picked it up and appreciated its hefty weight for its size before turning towards Nijire. Is this it? Nijire looked at him with wide, excited eyes before her expression fell. No, that's just a rock. Dragon Ball are orange and have stars in them. Oh, Izuku scratched the back of his head and then stopped. A massive, Vegeta-sized energy appeared right in front of them. Then the owner of that energy appeared with a shimmer. It was him, the guy that beat All Might. He was taller than Vegeta by quite a bit, and had even more ridiculous hair that seemed to take gravity as a suggestion. He was wearing a laborer's outfit, one fit for farming, and he even had a hoe resting on one shoulder. Oh, it's just you, Nijire. Goku gave a childish laugh and scratched the back of his head. I was worried that some thieves were pillaging my grandpa's house. Technically they were thieves. Grandpa Goku? Nijire gasped and spun towards the only other pure-blooded scion on Earth and gave him a great big tackling hug. Where'd you hide it? You found a Dragon Ball and hid it out here, didn't you? Goku laughed and let his arm drop. Oh, well, your friend right there has it. Nijire let go of Goku and looked at him like he was full of ghee, then looked towards the ball Izuku was holding. But aren't they supposed to be orange? Well, they used to. Goku laughed and walked over to Izuku. But a long time ago I made a really big wish, and they've been like that for a while now. Hi there, I'm Goku, by the way. You must be Izuku. Vegeta's talked a lot about you. Really? Izuku offered the Dragon Ball to Goku. Yeah. He says you're going to be super strong one day. Goku took the ball and then shook Izuku's hand. His grip was so strong. And I think he's right. You've been training strong. Thank you, sir. Hee, you called me sir? Goku giggled and turned towards Nijire. You can take the Dragon Ball if you want, I don't mind, just make sure you bring me back the 4-star ball when you're done. But I don't think you'll be able to make a wish for a long time. But Nijire took the Dragon Ball and stared at it for a while. Why is it gray? Why isn't it orange? What was your wish? Why can't we make a wish? Oh wow. I forgot how many questions you asked. Goku laughed and placed his hands on his hips. Boy, wow, you've really grown up, Nijire. I remember when you were an ankle biter. Nijire pouted and gave a huff. Answer my questions, Grandpa. Oh, well, Goku scratched his cheek and looked away from Nijire. You see, after we saved the Earth again and was given a second life, I gathered up all the Dragon Ball and wished the world would be filled with strong people. Next thing I know, The world's all different and people have had these quirk things for years. And the Dragon Ball have been sleeping ever since. What? Izuku shouted and stared at Goku with an open mouth. You wish that people had quirks? Goku just laughed and scratched the back of his head. Oh yeah. And it was super worth it. Izuku felt faint. The faintness he felt from the knowledge that his entire world had been based around this idiot's. Vegeta might be rubbing off on him a tad bit too much, boneheaded, okay a lot. Wish faded when Izuku looked towards Nijire. Her usually cute pout was quickly deteriorating as she stood there. Her feet heaved with a silent sob as a tear fell down her cheeks. Nijire, Izuku made a move to comfort her. She spun on her heel and ran outside, where she let out a frustrated scream and took off in a hurry. Izuku let his arm drop as he looked at the spot where Nijire stood. Did him being a scion mean that much to her? Or was there something else? He could feel Nijire's energy shining on the horizon like a distant star. He might not be fast enough to catch her, but there was no way he'd lose sight of her. Oh geez, Goku muttered as he walked forward. Was it something I said? What? Izuku shook his head and looked at the man. Why do you think that? Well, it's just, she's Bulma's granddaughter, and Bulma tends to run off like that when I say something stupid. Goku scratched the back of his head and sighed. Vegeta just yells at me. Izuku could understand why, though he wasn't sure if it was mostly because Vegeta was always yelling or if it was because Goku was, well, the only word that Izuku could think of to call the world martial arts champion was Goku. I think she's just upset that she can't make a wish. Oh well, what wish did she want to make? Izuku felt his cheeks burn as he thought about how all of this was for him. She wanted to turn me into a scion. Goku scratched the back of his head. Why would she want that? I think, Izuku bit his lip and felt the magnitude of difference between his own ki and Goku's. Sure, Goku's ki was currently being suppressed, a bit like a sleeping giant, but, just like a sleeping giant, it was strong not to notice it. I think that she wants me to be stronger. Since I'm not that strong. Well, I mean some of the strongest people I know are scions, but there's lots of super strong people out there that aren't scions either, like that one All Might guy. He was fun to fight. I hope he's at the next tournament. Goku laughed and patted Izuku on the back. And I'm sure if you keep training, you can get plenty strong. Besides, wouldn't something like that change who you are? Izuku took a moment and stared at his hand. That's what he was afraid of. Being a scion would mean that he wasn't human. That sounded like such a big change. If they went through with it, would he even still be him? Thank you, Goku-sensei. I bet if Vegeta heard you say that you'd be in all kinds of trouble. Goku scratched his nose and beamed with pride. Probably. Izuku stopped and felt Nijire stop moving. In 5 minutes, she had gone all the way to the coast. Even at his top speed, it'd take him 15 minutes to get there. I'll go check on Nijire. Do you want me to take you to her? No, it's fine. Besides, she stopped moving, so I should be able to get to her no problem. Goku's eyes went a bit wide. You can sense her that far. Izuku nodded and then took a few running steps towards the door. See you around, Goku. Hey, come back when you're done. I'll tell Chi-Chi to cook extra. Izuku nodded and floated until he was above the mountainous terrain, then honed in on Nijire's signature. He wanted to make sure she was okay, and part of the reason why he had waited was so she wouldn't feel like running if he was chasing her. Besides, she might need some alone time. 15 minutes away. He gathered his ki, feeling it pool in his feet and then down towards the bottom of his feet. Let's get there in 10. The wind cracked around him as he blasted forward with more speed than he had ever managed before. The downside was that it was draining him faster than ever, especially since he kept pushing himself faster. He blasted through a low-hanging cloud, scattering it to the wind, before he arrived at where he sensed Nijire's energy. She was at a seaward cliff that looked over a tranquil-looking beach that was nearly inaccessible from the coast, save for a jagged path that wound its way down the steep green slopes. It looked like the perfect place for a barbecue. Even if he was blind, it would be easy to spot Nijire. She just kind of stood out no matter what to him. She was sitting on the very edge, her legs hanging off the edge as she stared at the defunct Dragon Ball in her hands. Izuku landed behind her, panting as he felt like he had just broken several personal bests getting over here. His head spun slightly, and he thought back to what Goku said about dinner. That would probably help cheer Nijire up as well. Without saying a word, he sat down next to Nijire. A brief fear of heights washed over him as he stared at the sheer drop and rocky waters right below him. He reached over and grabbed Nijire's hand, only for her to pull back and wipe a tear away. "Sorry," Nijire muttered, a faint smile on her face as she looked down at the Dragon Ball. "I'll be fine, I'm just not good when I'm super excited for something but then I can't do it. I think it's just disappointment." "It's okay." Izuku grabbed her by her waist and hugged her. She leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder. He buried his head into her hair for a moment, placing a simple embrace to the top of it. "I understand. But why was me becoming a scion that big of a deal to you?" Nijire sniffed and shrugged. "It wasn't. I mean, I thought it would be cool and stuff, but really, that was just an excuse." "For what?" "I wanted to go on an adventure with you." Nijire huffed, kicking her legs against the side of the cliff and glared out towards the sea. "Like, this was supposed to be like what my grandma and grandpa Goku did when they were little. Going around fighting bad guys, collecting the Dragon Ball, and just having fun." Izuku placed his hand on the Dragon Ball and smiled towards it. "So that was it. And Demon, did that feel good to hear? We can still go and look for them. But that defeats the point." Nijire leaned back, falling down onto the dirt and holding the Dragon Ball high up into the air, her legs still flailing. "Like, part of the fun of an adventure is getting a reward at the end. How about if we get them all, I'll give you an embrace." She leaned up and raised an eyebrow at him, her entire body still for half a moment. "That's not a reward. I mean, they're good, but I can embrace you all I want." Izuku laughed, and felt his cheeks burn at that idea. "Yeah, well, what if it's a really, really good embrace?" Her eyebrow raised higher. "Keep talking." He had nothing. He fell down onto the ground beside her and reached for the Dragon Ball once more. It was oddly smooth despite being rough like stone. "I'll work on that." Hee, "I'll be sure to make sure you get lots of practice." What did that mean? He knew what that meant. Kissing. And lots of it. Besides, he took the Dragon Ball from her, feeling its surprising weight balanced on his palm. It's not like these things don't have any power. What? Nijire sat up and looked at him. "But they're inert. I mean, the dragon radar can detect them, right? That must mean that there's something still in there." Izuku sat up and handed her back the Dragon Ball. "So, we can still go on the adventure, we can still find them, and we can still make a wish. It might just need to be a small one." Nijire gasped and then launched herself onto him, knocking both of them off the cliff. They tumbled for a few moments in the air until they caught themselves inches above the water. Nijire laughed and pulled her head back, and then dove in to give him an embrace. He gasped and felt his toes slip into the water slightly before he melted into that embrace. "You're the best boyfriend ever. What should we wish for? It has to be small, right? Well, we might not even be able to do it, but we should still think about it." "Right. Oh, and even if we can't, then we can just make a wish later since we'll have all the Dragon Ball. Well, besides this one, since Grandpa Goku will want it back." Nijire laughed, pulling him up into the air with her as they spun slowly. They landed back on the cliff, and Nijire bounced happily while looking at the stone orb. "What should we wish for?" Izuku shrugged. "I don't know. How about, what was it that Nijire always complained about?" "Right." He felt his cheeks burn as he examined her shoulder where the strap of her BR was visible. Why not a super amazing BR that won't ever be uncomfortable? That's what Oolong wished for. But it was panties. Nijire adjusted her BR slightly and then stopped, her thumb just barely under the strap. "Oh, but that does give me a super awesome mega idea." "What is it?" "A surprise." She laughed, spinning away from him and floating upwards. She stuck her tongue out at him and winked. "You'll just have to wait and find out when we get all the Dragon Ball. But don't worry. I'm sure you'll like it." "What?" Izuku floated up to join Nijire in the air. "Oh, by the way, Goku said that he wanted us to eat with him. Something about Chi-Chi cooking extra." Nijire gasped. "Grandma Chi-Chi's cooking? What are we doing around here? Let's go."